Hi, my name is Reverend Dale Brown, and I'm here with the Reverend Karen Sadberry. Together we make up the pastoral team at Community Church at Ocean Pines. And this is our first podcast of the new year, 2025. Both Karen and I hope that you had a wonderful Christmas season and a happy new year. I got to spend the new year with the dear people of St. Paul United Methodist Church at their watch night service, and they're always wonderful hosts, and their pastor, the Reverend Peggy Briggs, is a great pastor, and it's a real pleasure to be there with them. And I also, Karen, got to eat black-eyed peas with them. So I'm going to have a really good year this year, because everybody knows that if you eat black-eyed peas on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, you're going to have a great year. I'm not sure where the name Hoppin' John came from, but did you eat black-eyed peas?
No.
Okay. Karen did not. Karen's not going to have a good year. She works with me, so that explains a lot. So anyway, welcome, and Austin's here taping, and so Austin is hiding behind the camera. I'd like to talk to you a little bit today about your devotional life. So much we think of being a Christian only as going to church on Sunday and how we live throughout the week. But I really believe with all my heart that it's very important for us to spend time with Christ on a regular, daily basis. And a lot of people want to. I mean, most of us want to spend more time with God and to deepen our faith and to grow our understanding and to grow our prayer life. It's just a matter of how do we do it. When I was growing up, Karen, I was a part of a group called Navigators, and they always emphasized quiet times. You spent an hour or a half hour or 15 minutes with Christ, and you read the Bible and you prayed and you did these things on a daily basis. And I really have to say, I'm thankful for that heritage, because it did build for me a reality that I need to pay attention to my faith on a daily basis. There are so many things that grab our attention. So many wonderful bright lights and squirrels that run by. And as we want to be faithful to Christ, we want to pay attention to the things that really matter, not just to be busy, but the things that are truly important and urgent for us. And that's part of our faith, our walk with Christ. I'm reminded that any relationship in which the two persons are not spending regular time together deteriorates. And that is true of our relationship with God as well. So this podcast, for a few moments, is about some of the practical how-tos of having a relationship with God on a daily basis. Excuse me. Now, Karen, I use two or three different devotional books. And I say two or three different. I have a couple that I work through regularly, and I have one that I work through with my spiritual director, and then I do one different one probably in Lent and in Advent. So the one that I always go back to is My Utmost for His Highest by Oswald Chambers. And Chambers was a missionary to Egypt and a great spiritual writer, turn of the 1800s into the 1900s, and yet his words ring true. And then I have another book that sort of gives guidance and direction to understanding what Chambers is writing, because Chambers is pretty deep, and I enjoy that. And with my spiritual director, I'm reading through a book that has 52 readings by Stephen Charlesworth, who's a Native American writer. During the season of Advent, I used one of the best devotional books I'd ever read, written by Tom Long, Presbyterian pastor and educator, about Advent. And I will probably, over the years, use much of that book in sermon content. It was just an outstanding book. So these are daily readings that you can do. You have daily, you have weekly, you have different kinds of things. Well, what do you read on a regular basis that grows your faith and builds your relationship with Christ?
I generally have a year-long devotional book. Right now, at your recommendation, I'm doing a year through the Psalms. but there's a series called 1 Year Devotionals, and there's one
Mm-hmm.
author, Chris Tigran, that I like because he always starts with a scripture and elaborates on that.
Right.
And then I usually do something different in Advent, well, something additional in Advent and Lent,
Okay.
and that varies from year to year.
You know, Lent is that time of year where we're called to deeper discipleship. So a lot of times we'll have special studies and special groups, and it's a time in which we prepare, excuse me, for Holy Week, but also for Easter and the time beyond that. Being good Methodists that we are, I think it's imperative that we mention a fellow Marylander who was a wonderful devotional writer and a friend of Mahatma Gandhi, and who wrote so many devotional books. I think he probably had, I don't mean this unkindly, never had an unpublished thought,
Okay.
but he's written many, many books. He's a great writer of a different era, probably the same era of Chambers, and that's E. Stanley Jones. And E. Stanley Jones' work is a little bit dated, but not bad. And his thoughts about the Christian faith are very much in keeping with our Methodist practice as well. And he was a missionary in India and just a Nobel Peace Prize winner, and just so many wonderful qualities. But he's from Baltimore, Maryland, is where he grew up. So we gotta support the local team here. Another book that I've come across, Karen, that's a great devotional book. I haven't used it as much as I thought it would, but it's a wonderful resource. It's called The Methodist Book of Prayer. And it's written by one of our elders out in the Missouri Conference. And he's written several other books. But it's just, it has something for the morning and something for the evening each day. And the morning, the author of the book, the person who put the book together, writes it, the devotional. And in the evening, it's drawn from a variety of sources. And it has a lot of good liturgy and a lot of good suggestions for prayer. So one of the things that both Karen and I would say to you is have some kind of devotional book. Have something to systematically guide and deepen your faith so that you're not just sort of floundering out there. And make it something that will make you stretch. In years past, I've used devotional books by Henry Nouwen, Thomas Merton, and many, many others, but have it be something not that just sounds really good, but something that you have to really think about, because we as United Methodists believe that warm hearts and active minds are the best way to faith. So let's shift a little bit here. So Karen, are there practices of prayer that are meaningful for you that you do on a daily or regular basis?
My biggest practice is journaling.
Okay.
No matter what
It's a great
spiritual practice I try, usually ends up including some journaling in there somewhere.
Okay.
Anyway. Even prayer, if I'm struggling to pray, if I just write out that prayer, for some reason there's something in that physical act of writing it out that helps me focus.
My son is 34, and you know Zachary. He believes that everything has to be electronic or online, but that physical act of putting pen to paper or pencil to paper really does make a difference. And there are a lot of studies out there that say, that it really helps to cement it in our mind. And it's good advice to, when you don't know how to pray or you want to pray more deeply, to always write a prayer. That's very good advice, Karen. Thank you. I had not thought about that. I think that's a wonderful, wonderful thought. For me, it's silence. I like sitting in silence on my porch when it's warm enough and watching for the birds and the animals and things in the backyard. Hopefully we won't have any more coyotes like we had a couple years back. But, just listening for God's voice. As a pastor, I know I do. I can't speak for you, but I think most of us as clergy do a lot of talking. And sometimes we need to stop talking and listen. And as we listen, we hear not only the voices of people around us, but we hear our own voice, our own individual internal voice, and we hear the voice of God. And, so I think that's important to do. When you talk, I think a good ratio for this, I think, is to talk to listen, to be silent twice as much as we talk. And if that were the case, we would be silent an awful lot of the time. And maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. So Austin, do you do anything in prayer that's a regular practice for you from behind the camera there, sir?
I pray.
Speak up, because you got.
I pray 3 times a day.
Okay, you pray the Lord's Prayer.
So at night I do.
Mhm.
In the morning I just say thank you for allowing me to wake up this morning.
Yeah. Adam Hamilton suggests that with a prayer life like this, and I think he's right. That when you get out of bed in the morning, you say, Lord, thank you for this day. This day belongs to you. Use it, use me as you see fit. At lunchtime to pray the Lord's Prayer. And at breakfast and lunch and dinner to pray grace. And then at the end of the day, pray, Lord, thank you for this day. Help me to see where I could have done better and been more faithful. Help me to see where I did well. Because we sometimes do a little bit of both. And another writer talks about praying the Lord's Prayer 3 or 4 times a day because it informs our praying. So often, I've said this before and I'll repeat it. You can get mad at me for that. Our praying is a lot like looking at the Sears and Roebuck catalog. Now, some of you are too young to know what a Sears and Roebuck catalog is. It's the same thing as a Montgomery Ward catalog, but it doesn't have. But when you used to get that at Christmas, and you'd flip the pages and you'd pick out what you wanted and things and order it. It's like an old-fashioned Amazon with paper. And I think it's kind of fun to look at that and to think about that, because if our prayer life is like that, it's not very deep. It's maybe a mile wide and inch deep. Well, what we're looking for is both impact, breadth, but we're also looking for depth of prayer life as well. So Karen, we'll go back to you. This is our final suggestion for the new year as a way to connect with God. There's as many as ways to connect with God as there are different people and personalities. But Scripture, how do you read Scripture that helps you connect with God?
Sometimes it's just reading it over and over again. Sometimes it's paying attention to, sometimes something that never seemed important before will spring out at me. Sometimes I'm searching for something in particular, and so I try to find a scripture that meets that particular need. But whatever it is, I try to leave space for God to surprise me and for God to speak.
So, do you have like a book of the Bible that you turn to? Do you read through the entire Bible? I mean, I know you're searching and being open to where God might lead you on any given day, but is there a plan behind what you do?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay.
Sometimes it
And that's
connects
okay.
sometimes it connects with that devotional.
And I know you're reading the lectionary readings
Right.
each week. And things like that. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a difference in personality. You know, for those persons who are very structured, very organized, not having a plan is like hard to swallow. But if you have a little bit more flexibility and freedom built into your personality, searching and looking every day is really a good thing.
Sometimes something else that I'm reading will suggest what scripture I read.
Sometimes the devotional book will suggest a scripture as well. For me, I try to read something from the Psalms every day. You talk about a suggestion I made to you about this devotional book. I love Psalms. And you and I have talked about the fact that Psalms has, as far as I can tell, every human emotion. And if if you're looking for something for that day, and you can almost always find something in Psalms, tend to read the Gospels a lot. I tend to try to read through the Gospels every year. If you read a chapter a day from the Gospels, you can read all the Gospels in 90 days and things. I'm not a big Paul fan. I mean, it's not my cup of tea, and I certainly don't enjoy reading Revelation. I think Austin likes Revelation over here. I'm not. It's not my thing. He's shaking his head no, but it's important to read. But as far as devotional reading, the thing I get out of Revelation is that chapters 21 and 22, but the 7 letters to the churches. and the one church that it says you're not hot or cold, you're just lukewarm. And if you ever drank lukewarm water,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
nasty
Uh-huh.
and things. So, so we have to be on fire. We have to be excited about serving Christ and about following Jesus. I would say to you, if you want to start a Bible reading program during the year, I would not start with Genesis. I love the book of Genesis. I would read it. I would actually, if you're a Christian, start with the book of Mark and read it one chapter a day or half a chapter a day. And the case is that you'll then be through the Gospel of Mark 2 times in 1 month. Then there's 16 chapters in Mark. And the great thing about that is it gives you a good outline of the life of Jesus. And then move on to Matthew or Luke. And the reason I say Matthew or Luke is that Mark, Matthew, and Luke are called synoptic gospels, meaning they're held by the same rule and they're very similar. John is its own animal, and I encourage you to read John. I used to think John was my favorite gospel. Now I'm really kind of stuck in there with Luke. But John is different because, for instance, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, called the synoptic gospels, have parables. Jesus tells lots of parables. John doesn't have any parables. John has these I am statements. I'm the bread of life. I'm the way, the truth. The synoptic gospels don't have any of that. So, if you're going to read through the synoptic gospels, then turn to John. John is a beautiful gospel of relationship. The other thing to note about the synoptic gospels, and Karen, if you ever thought about this, is that they talk about faith being something you do, that you live out, that you flesh out. John talks about faith being something that you believe,
Right.
what you think. And the truth is both of those are important. Both of those are vital. So that would be my suggestion. Read something, read a psalm, read, on most occasions. If you really want something that's challenging, read a proverb, a chapter of Proverbs. There's 31. In a month, you'll have read that entire book. So here's the kicker. No one is going to take you by the hand and sit you down in a chair and make you do it. If you want a closer relationship with God, there are so many ways it can happen. John Wesley identified something called the means of grace. How do we get to know God? How do we relate to God? But the important thing is that we do it. So there are a lot of books out there about developing habits. And if you take 60 days, you can develop the habit of reading scripture, reading a devotional book, praying. And if you were to stop after that 60-day period, then you would miss it and you would be drawn right back into it. So some of those books like Atomic Habits and the writers like James Clear and Charles Duhigg and others will help you to know how to develop habits. The easy way to do this, though, is to have someone whom you're accountable to. So, for instance, Austin, you live with your grandparents. You can talk to Pop and Grandma and say, hey, I want to read scripture every day. I want to pray every day. I want to read a devotional book every day. You have the right to check in with me and see. And to do it at the same time and in the same place every day. If you do some of those things and start small, don't try to say, I'm going to read for 4 hours. Read for 5 minutes. Read for 10 minutes. It takes generally about 20 minutes to read a chapter of the Bible. And if doing so, the regularity is important. Now, let me close with this little story because I like stories. There was a man who rode into Dear Abby years and years, and this is an old story, years ago. And he said to Dear Abby in his writing that his wife had not made any meals that were memorable. She was a good cook, but the cooking was such that, the meals were nourishing and good, but not outstanding. They didn't spring to mind anything for him. So dear Abby wrote back and she said something to this effect. The meals may not have been memorable, but had you not eaten them on a regular basis, I do believe you would have starved to death. The point is, don't allow your faith to starve to death. Every day is going to be different. Not every day is going to be the mountaintop. There are certain places in scriptures that are darn hard to read and darn hard to understand. But it's the regularity, it's the discipline, it's the practice. And Karen and Austin, I have to believe in my heart that God honors faithfulness. And if you are faithful, God will meet you there. God is already there. He's just waiting for us to show up. So in the words of Nike, just do it. Go out there and just do it. And don't hesitate to find someone who is like-minded and work with them to establish trust and accountability. And I will guarantee you that if you spend 15, 20, 30 minutes a day with God, first thing in the morning, that first of all, every day will be different. And second, your year will be different as well. Have a great day and may God bless you.